My name's Janice Abel, and I'm an analyst with ARC. My focus areas are in the manufacturing intelligence, manufacturing operational analytics, as well as the MES, batch manufacturing, and also I've done some work with the operator training simulators and MES. So the thing about it is that, anyway, we spent a lot of time on analytics this past year. So we're going to talk a little bit about the analytics. Some of them are like new startup companies, new technologies. We're moving into the machine learning predictive space, as well as some are outside of manufacturing, some of the things that I've seen. So I think it's a really exciting time right now for digital technologies. And what I'd like to talk about is the operational analytics, some of the drivers and benefits, and I did do a survey last year, and actually I did one before in 2012. It was really, originally the session was called Manufacturing Intelligence or Enterprise Manufacturing Intelligence, but the new term today is really operational analytics, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. So hopefully everybody will kind of understand where we're coming from and where everything's going. And so I will show you a few survey results, and I have a second session after this, and in the other session I'll show different aspects of the survey result. And it's a long survey, so I'm not going to show everything. We will have a strategy report released, and all of the information will be in it. And what I had done was just show you a few of the things that I think are important, some of the drivers and some of the top selection criteria, those kind of things. So the thing about it is you try to figure out, well, where does everything sit? So in my head, this is kind of like the way I think. So you have your control and automation. I showed this before, and I know these are changing. I know there's new architectures and all these different types of digital technologies, and I think that there will be one of the things that the modern MES system is changing. And I have seen some evolution to this. Like some of it is going to the cloud. I've seen complete MES solutions in the cloud. Not in the process industry, I can honestly say that, just parts of it in the process industries. I've seen it in the discrete industries. So it is something that will happen. I think in the future more and more you'll see that. But like I was just saying, I had my computer and it was synchronizing for the cloud, so I couldn't update something. So that was 10 minutes, and that's a lot of time sometimes in a process industry. So, some people are saying they're putting historical data in the cloud, and some people are doing other types of data. But I think that some of the issues will go away with some of the new technologies that are coming out, and I think we'll talk about that today. So what I see in the modern MES, we see planning and scheduling, and recipe management, batch, sometimes batch management is included in many cases. We also see workflow production management and quality management. And then the part that we're really focused on today is the operational analytics. And that includes the data connected, all the contextualized data, the analytics and the dashboards and the KPIs, all the things you're seeing, the visibility in the operations area. And tomorrow we're actually doing one that's tying into the supply chain. So that's something that people are starting to do as well. It's getting more and more important to do all of those things. And so in addition, what we are seeing is we're seeing enterprise-wide applications of this. A few years ago in 2012, there was more people that were just starting out and doing one application here. Now we're seeing people roll it out. If they find it works in one application, they're rolling it out around the globe. So there is some applications because they're getting benefits, and I'm going to talk about the ROI in the next session. But this is kind of the connection. Some of the data is going to the cloud, some is staying on site right now. And the future that I envision is that a lot of these things will be done. MES will become just applications. You'll see like planning and scheduling. I mean, this is what I think will happen: workflow management, batch management, and it'll be little apps that intercoordinate and things like that. That's what I think will happen. That's my prediction anyway. So, and I'm sure everybody in this room has some other ideas, so we can talk about that during the panel discussion and ask questions then. The first kind of thing that we look at is there is a data infrastructure historian. There's obviously got to be some place we put the data. And that could be in the cloud or that could be on site, and we'll talk about that too as I go through. So, the other part is the data collection, and that's basically the integration, aggregation, and the management of software. And then the data context, we've been hearing a little bit about that, like the contextualization and the modeling and the access to the data. And the analytics, we've heard a lot about, and the analysis, and that's changing too. And some of this is embedded in all-in-one solution, I've seen that. And I've also seen solutions that are just parts or like modules of this. And then I have also the visualization, the reporting, and that's also changing. And people are getting a lot of value out of that. And I'll talk about that as we go through. So the area today, in this part of the session, so that's what I call operational analytics and operational intelligence. That's where you're getting all the information and the visibility and the analytics for the process. So areas that I want to talk about today on this session, the next session I'll focus on some other areas, and particularly the ROI, is really around the data collection, the data infrastructure, at least from the survey point, and the data context. And the reason that I want to focus on that is because it's very important. And you'll see that with even some of the presentations that you'll see. Because sometimes it can be the costliest part of putting together an operational analytics solution. So what are some of the technology drivers? Well, the high-level drivers, of course, are the Internet of Things, all the data and the volume of data that people have, and just doing something with the data and really making some decisions from the data. The cloud computing is enabling that because it allows people to do some of these robust analytics, and a lot of the solutions we're seeing are being done in the cloud to take advantage of the storage and also the fact that it's less expensive and the cost comes down. We're also seeing smart sensors with a lot of information, and some of that people are talking about going directly to the cloud, not necessarily through the control system. So it depends on what you're doing. And then we're also seeing a lot around the visualization. We're seeing even some virtual reality things. We're seeing simulations of the whole process. And I've seen that from several people. More is probably just to see where if you change a product or something like that, you might have a bottleneck or something, and you want to just move things around. Then we have a number of analytic tools, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and then the smart connectors. So this is one survey, and I had done this in 2012, but I kind of knew what the results would be because we track it in studies in both the MES space and the manufacturing intelligence. And the thing that got me was, okay, so in 2016, you notice the traditional on-site's going down. And you can see that the private cloud, the software as a service is starting to go up. But the one that really got me was I was a little bit surprised was the public cloud is really starting to tick up. And I think that's because of Microsoft and Amazon, people feel a little bit more secure about their data. And so unless people do not plan to use it, that was the other thing that I thought was interesting. So there is going to be, and it really wasn't surprising to me, but it was just nice to kind of verify what you're thinking and what you're hearing. So these are some of the factors that are driving operational analytics, and it's really the big data and all this, we're up to whatever, petabytes, zettabytes, zottabytes, and whatever after that. I said hellabyte in one presentation I gave him. Andy made me take it out. So anyway, I said that would be the next level of data. And so the computing power, we all know about Moore's Law. You're seeing that the power is just going up substantially compared to even when I started out. We had a shared laptop in our group that we used, and that was pretty tough. And also the changing workforce. I mean, it's going to the millennials, these are really tech-savvy people that really know how to use the technology and they want to use it. And then the other part is the value. And we'll touch a little bit upon that in some of the use cases, but in the next session, that's kind of more of the focus. So you have a reason to come to the next session. That's why I said that. So really, it's about finding actionable insights in the data. So what are the top drivers for operational intelligence? Well, we asked that question. We had a number of other answers, and you'll see that when the strategy report goes out, but I just took the top ones. And it's number one is making faster decisions. Those are the things that they do it, and avoiding abnormal behavior, getting value from the data that's already being collected, improving yields, and improving process visibility, and enabling the data integration, the mining, and the conversion. So the other thing is, and this is important too, is that the reality is that a lot of people still operate in silos. I heard somebody talking about we still have spreadsheets and paper documents. So the thing about it is, and even was and is still today, is people still spend too much time looking for the information. There's all different kinds of things that integrate into the operations, and we're going to see some examples of that today. But there's all kinds of, you find little silos here and there, and some people, one person wrote in one of the survey things that people like having the data on their laptop. They like controlling the data. So it might be even a cultural thing. So some of the other data challenges that companies face today include, the integration of the data, that it's very hard sometimes to contextualize it and get the data and find the data. Also, the dashboards and the spreadsheets are not always consistent. We all know that. And then the insights are too late to impact the decision. The right person doesn't get it at the right time, basically. And so that can make a big difference if people can see what they're doing and can actually make changes. So the other things that, some of the other things that were considered, that were most important factors we asked, so what are the things when you were selecting would you consider important? The number one thing was the ease of integration with all the data sources and other IT, OT systems. And maybe even ET today, as we heard this morning. So the second thing on the list was the analytic tools. The third thing was the ease of use, the ability to adapt and learn, and those things are really important to people, more so than some people realize. And it makes a big difference. And that gets to the quality of the visualization, which is the next one, the dashboards and the tools. And then the next one down is how scalable is it? Can I scale it across different, across the plant, across multiple plants, across the globe? And the last part that people said is, which I didn't understand this, was the proof of ROI. Because when you see the top inhibitors, it almost flip-flops. Because it said that the cost to justify the business case is number one, and that I'll show that in the next session, I think, unless it's still in this one since I switched some slides around. As far as operational analytics, the number one, we asked about the sources of data, and I just thought this was interesting because, of course, the historian of the time series, that didn't surprise me that that was the number one source of data. And the next one was the process automation data, LIMS data, ERP, and then spreadsheets was the one that it didn't surprise me either. But so there was quite a number, and then we had some other answers too, and I put some of the sources like safety management data, asset information data, human resource data, those kind of things. They also had that they integrate in. So next, we asked about what about the technologies that are being used to support analytics data? And we had everything from the number one was a relational database, number two was historian, and number three was spreadsheet. But we're also seeing some newer, like in-memory databases, NoSQL databases, and web services showing up at the bottom. So the technologies are evolving. So now and this is, let me just go back one. This is just, so they have 25% of the people said that they're implementing enterprise-wide solutions, and that has definitely gone up since 2012 when I started doing this survey. So just so you know that we're definitely on the rise as far as people are starting to. And I also did the number of users, and you can see that there's definitely an increase. It's kind of like gone along, just like kind of like the cloud did. So we're definitely seeing changes in the industry. Okay, this is the analytics and the dashboards, and I said it a little bit ago that it's really important. People said that they want it in real time. They want to be able to get it before whatever they're doing completes, so that they can make a change before some behavior that they want to change happens. They also want it accessible. They also want it to be actionable, and we're all seeing things where people are getting into predictive, where they can predict what's going to happen. And then they can also look at the prescriptive, which really tells them maybe what's going to happen if they do that, and what the situation will be. And most of the cases we've seen for the predictive have been with a person who gets the information, even the prescriptive. So they actually would go out and make the final decision. It's not completely automated. However, I have seen situations where it is automated, more so, I guess, again, in the discrete industries. Whereas in the process industries and the hazardous chemical industries, I think that it'll probably happen, but maybe not as quickly. Because a lot of the processes are probably not as, I think that they're not as repetitive as some of the other things. But certain cases are repetitive, and that's where I think you can get a lot of help from the analytics and the tools today. So one of the things that I looked at was, when I first started looking at this a few years ago, I was like, well, everybody's talking about analytics. What's the big deal about analytics? You know, I see that all over the place, analytics. Well, at first I said, well, you know, is it, what kind of, like, all these people are saying, oh, we do this kind of regression analysis, multivariate, but it's really not about the types of analytics. It's really more about the cases, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the thing is, though, even PID control is analytics and statisticals and neural networks, and even, we heard about this like 20-something years ago, and the problem was the computing power and the processing power was just too costly to do anything. But today, I think it's there as far as that goes, and I think that the big thing is the cost has come down to a level where it is affordable and it does make a difference in the values there. So a lot of people talk about, you know, and last year we had the Watson senior scientist from Watson speak and from IBM, and he talked about the cognitive learning, which is really a branch of artificial intelligence, and you know, and it uses natural language and it uses machine learning and all these other features that are incorporated into it. We're hearing a lot about that, and people are starting to use those applications. So I guess it's, you know, it's partly true that analytics means the same thing, but it's a lot more robust, and it's, as someone said, it's not your grandfather's analytics, but it really is your grandfather's analytics on one hand. It's partly true, but at the same time, it's just more iterations and things like that. And anybody who's ever built a model, you have to do multiple iterations. You look at the inputs, the outputs, and you have to have good data to begin with. And to build a model, if you have bad data into it, it might not be as accurate. So that's the other part of the equation. So the other thing about the visualization is that, you know, it has to be accessible. People have to be able to use it. A lot of mobility tools. That was a few years ago. That was actually driving a lot of the. A lot of people were implementing mobility, and I think people who have it today. They also want it to be very easy to implement and deploy. And a lot of people want this auto capabilities, and people are starting to build those in. And I'm seeing that. So that'll be very helpful. The other thing that we're seeing, and the things that I think you should keep in mind for the questions include, like, number one, there's all kinds of new analytic tools. And those are the things that I think are the real value here, because there's some that do, like, really good, be able to seek and find the data really, really easily. There's others that have their own architecture. You can talk about that, whether they call it an architecture or their own platform. It kind of varies, and I've seen different people use those terms. And then also the other thing that we're seeing as a result of some of these issues is people are actually providing services, software as a service. So I think that's going to be really interesting in the future. And then the other thing we're just starting to see is very innovative visualization. Like I was talking about, make it a simulation of the process or a hologram even of the process. And I think you're going to see more of that in the next, maybe even next year we might have a speaker that'll speak on that. So I think that would be really interesting. So I did also ask about the role-based dashboards provided, and of course the number one, as you would expect, would be production management, because that kind of covers all too. And then the next one was maintenance, which I was surprised was second, and then operations. And these are ones that are provided by the solutions and engineers, and then goes down to executive and then quality. So we have seen a number of use cases today. And the use cases are pretty much all over the place. Some of them are inside the industry, some of the out of the industry. You know, we've seen things in chemicals and pharmaceuticals. We've seen things in oil and gas. Last year, we had someone here from the coin manufacturer from South African Mint, and they talked about how they're reducing waste. And so they make Cougaran, so it's literally there's gold in what they do. And then, so we also had someone talk about the utilities in the wind. We had PJM and we had Iberdrola, and Iberdrola was doing some interesting work where, to make a long story short, you can search the information. It took months to get this information that they needed, in order to save a lot of money, they could do it in like a day, very quickly they could get that information. So this was a time saving there. So that was really, I mean, there were some terrific things, and we're hearing all these use cases, and I think that's the value of the whole forum, truthfully. And the train, I've seen a lot on trains and predictive trains. We had one here last year that talked about train maintenance. And I also heard one, this is kind of an interesting one, because one of the things the analytics can do really well is they can find the correlations in the data. The thing is, they need to work with some of the experts in order to figure out really what it means in a way. Because, and I'll talk about that a little more in a minute, but the one that I saw was this train. It was the bearings on the train, and they had some sensors on the wheels, so they'd know when the wheels would be, would probably need maintenance. So they compared it to, they came up with a correlation that had to do with the toilet flushes versus the maintenance on the wheels. So they were like, well, what is the correlation with the bearings? So they said that, I kind of knew right away, and I'm sure people in here have already guessed too. If the more the toilet's flushed, that means there's more people, and they never counted the number of people or the weight on the trains. So there was actually correlation there. But there might be some situations where there isn't. It's just data, and it may look like there's a correlation, but there may not be. So which brings me to the future, really. What people really want to drive to is they really want the self-driving car for the factory. And that's what people ultimately want. And we are starting to see some of these autonomous operations. And as I said, probably more so in the discrete, we're seeing it in the automotive industry. This is actually a Tesla, the new Tesla car that they're doing, and they're making that like all energy efficient. They have solar everywhere. It's going to be an awesome, I'd like to get a tour of it, but anyway, that's what I think people are really looking for, and they'd like to just push a button and go kind of thing, like, almost like the Jetsons or whatever, the new generation. And so that's why I said the future is now. And then I kind of talked a little bit about this last year, because there is an ethics part to this, when you're starting to make these predictive things and you go into autonomous operations. So I asked people, just pretend now you're driving along in your Google car. And it's a great day, everything's sunny, you're watching along the streets, and you're in your automated car, it's a few years in the future. And now all of a sudden, you're driving along, you're on your phone, and the car comes around the corner. Well, you have to make a decision, because in the middle of the road, it's a bunch of little kids and the donkey as you come around that curve. So your choice is you drive off the cliff and kill yourself, or you kill the kids. So I asked this engineer, one of the other guys that I work with, I said, well, what would you do? He said, I don't know, she's kind of cute. That's what he said to me. So he said, no, it's the right thing to do is save the children. So then I said, well, what if she had 2 little kids in the back seat too? So what's the right thing to do then? So those things are things that are going to have to be pre-programmed. And when we go to automated manufacturing, that is going to be an ethics dilemma, and it is going to be important. And you're going to have to figure out, even when you go, especially in the hazardous industry, do you go with lowest risk? What do you do? And you are going to have to make decisions like that. And one programmer said to me, I'm just not going to make a decision, I'll just let it happen. But I don't think that's the way to go. So the decision will be pre-programmed, and you have to really figure out, well, truthfully, what's the right decision, and that's something that maybe it'll take an ethics committee to do in the future. So that's where we're going, folks. And then the other thing that people talk a lot about is the data scientist. And in 2012, which is kind of when I was hearing all about this and I started doing these surveys, they said the sexiest job in the 21st century, Harvard Business Review said, is going to be the data scientist. And I don't know, you can tell me, I'm sure there's a few data scientists out here. So it was the #1 job in 2016 on Glassdoor, and it's the #1 job this year again. So there you go. And I think people are interested. I think it would be interesting because, you're looking at, I find, looking at new technologies and trying to figure out exactly what the data says is kind of, in a way, it's fun. Especially if you have some of these great tools that people are using today. And there's an 11% growth rate. It was higher last year, but I think it slowed down a little. But that's still pretty good because I started looking at it because, I have a background in chemical engineering. So I thought, well, geez, I wonder what chemical engineering's growth is. Because a lot of them are ready to retire. Most of them are in their late 50s, maybe mid-50s to early 60s. And a lot of them are looking at retirement soon. Some of them are walking out the door now. So I say, well, geez, I wonder how they feel about that. So the reason that the glass door, that the executives and people want to hire a lot of data scientists, because they do believe that there is value in the data. And you'll see some of these use cases, and you are going to know that there's a lot of value in this data. So it makes it easy to do some of these applications. And I think everybody, if you think you have a good possible area to do something in, I say go for it, and try something, because I know you'll get the returns, at least from what I'm seeing. So the other part is, so I looked into chemical engineers, and chemical engineers growing at 2%. I think electrical was 0, mechanical was either 2 or 3%, and I think 5% was industrial engineers. So they're growing at a much slower rate, but I don't know what will happen in the future. I know a lot of kids aren't even going into it, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. And the fact remains that you still need those people. You need the domain experts. They're all important, and you need to understand the insights and also to make those actionable decisions. You really do need them. You need the data scientists, and the data scientists are good, I think, for the tools, but then the tools should be used by the engineers to get the information and also to say, okay, we see this correlation, what does it mean? To put that prescription in, to make the prediction. So that's what you're really going to need them for. So what's important? Some of the things that people said is the return on investment, and also even the time to value. And it may not be a dollar and cents thing, although that looks best to the executives. It could be something that's like a time issue, and you can equate that. Even if you can equate it to the monetary value, people like that better, but it gets more attention. And it's about making those efficiency improvements. It's also about the modern infrastructure for interoperability. That's really important, because you need to be able to interconnect and connect the data easily. You also need to have intuitive tools to use and things like that, and you need to be able to deploy them and have the dashboards that help you get that information and visibility. And I've had people that tell me that just the visibility alone, in fact, we had an application that I saw, and it was just, this person was just doing the visualization with the geographical information, and they said just that alone, their people started collaborating more. They could see a huge increase in performance from the team. So that was, I thought that was interesting. And so the other part is integrating the data and the technologies and the mobile and all of that. That's all important, and all the new data that's coming along. So finally, just like a few final thoughts, and that is that we're seeing a lot in the area of, I see a lot of applications in the predictive analytics with the tools in the area of asset maintenance. That's probably, like, to me, that's probably the areas that you can do a case and you know you're going to get a return. The other area I'm starting to see tools in is in the quality area, and you're going to see some examples of all of this today. And I think that that's because people realize that the process quality could be improved using some of these analytic tools. And I've seen it in the process, I've seen it upstream in the raw materials, and I've also seen it after the process where they're looking at, there was a problem with a product recently, and they really don't know what the problem was. It was made according to specs, everything, but yet they still can't figure out what went wrong. So I had heard about some work that they're doing in this area, so that was interesting. And I don't want to say what the product is, but anyway, so just some few final thoughts. And that is that the most important thing is people want real-time actionable decisions. And the thing about the data is, unless you take that data by itself, it's virtually useless unless you do something with it that results in actionable intelligence and insight that will deliver value to the organization. And I think that's key. So that's my message today, and I think you're going to see that with some of these use cases. And we really do have some really great experts, and we have them here from all over the world, so you'll see that. So I'd like to thank you, and what I'll do is introduce our first speaker.